Perry joins us. He is the former editor of the Associated Press in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. He's also the publisher of the Ask Questions Later on Substack. He joins us from Tel Aviv. First of all, can I just get your reaction to Israel coming out in the last hour or so, saying one of the bodies it received from Hamas was not a captive?
I think they also said they are willing to accept that that was a mistake. So whereas it's very unfortunate, I don't think that is a deal breaker or a real change in the basic narrative. But there are two things that are absolutely deal breakers and changes, which is Hamas holding on to the vast majority of the hostage bodies, and more than some indication that Hamas has no intention of disarming. I've been saying for 2 years that the return of the hostages and the elimination of Hamas as a military force in Gaza are their goals. And I hear all these other guests claiming Israeli politics and other complications and secret desires to continue the war nonetheless, and it's basically false. It's real simple. They want the bodies and they want Hamas to disarm as agreed, or at least as appears in a 20-point plan.
Yeah, just on the return of the bodies of the deceased captives, everyone knew that was going to be extremely difficult given just how decimated, especially northern Gaza has been, and that it was going to take some time. So is there any acknowledgement of that in Israel at the moment?
Yes, there is. But it boils down to lack of trust. There is great concern in Israel that Hamas will try to hold on to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bodies that they know where they are in order to keep them as future leverage for future consideration. Now, Hamas did this for over a decade with the bodies of Hadar Golden and Oren Shul, and they expect Hamas to do that again. So there are 28 bodies. When Hamas initially said that we may not be able to find all of them within the 48 or 72-hour window, which is now expired or is about to expire, there was some understanding of that, yes. They're not completely unreasonable, and indeed it's true. Not that Israel controls 53% still, because that's not where the hostages were. But it's true that there's a lot of rubble, and you could sort of envision where a few bodies might be difficult to find. But the problem is that Hamas walked right into the suspicion that they're going to play games here by producing none but 4 of the bodies. So 24 of the 28 bodies they have not produced. At this point, I would say even the most peacenik Israeli is convinced that this is untrue and it is games and it is, in fact, a violation.
Right. The other point that you raised earlier was the disarmament of Hamas. Donald Trump's vowed to disarm Hamas violently if he has to. Does that give Netanyahu an out or an excuse to escalate things again?
Look, anyone who's heard me on your channel and elsewhere knows that I'm extremely skeptical of and indeed cynical about Netanyahu. So your framing of the question is not completely wrong, but in this case it misses the point. Netanyahu, I think, does want the war to end because regardless of any actual, peaceable intention, if you look at the politics, his coalition is done anyway. He has elections in a few months no matter what. So preserving his coalition no longer is the imperative that it once was, where the far right that indeed wants continued war but is a tiny minority could potentially bring him down if he prematurely ended the war. He now needs to end the war because the Israeli people are really tired of the war and distrust his motivations, many of them. So he wants the war over, but you're back down to the 2 basic things that so many people that you guys interview seem to simply reject in their effort to complicate the narrative. They want the hostages, they want Hamas disarmed. The issue is that Hamas never agreed. Hamas agreed to return the hostages, or at least living ones apparently, in exchange for an end to the war temporarily, permanently, no one knows. They haven't made real public statements. Trump pretended like they agreed. And he not only pretended like they agreed, but he set up this monumental festival all over the region in the Sharm el-Sheikh, and he declared the war over. But that was based on the understanding that everyone accepted the 20 points, which Israel did, and which Hamas did not. And if indeed Hamas doesn't disarm, which in my view would not be a violation, because I never heard them agree, but it would, contradict what Trump said, then we all have a very big problem. Then Netanyahu will face a situation where the deal he got the hostages for an end to the war, he could have gotten a year ago, and the intervening year was a huge waste of life and treasure. That's a political problem.
Indeed. I guess it goes to the point, the fact that there is so little detail and the vagaries of that 20-point plan. We'll have to leave it there for the moment, though. Dan Perry for us in Tel Aviv.